The winter wind cut through the settlement like a blade, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin. Nessa wrapped her arms around herself, but her thin clothing offered little protection. The luminescent markings that traced patterns across her neck and arms beautiful by her peoples. Standards seemed to pulse weakly in the fading light, betraying her exhaustion and hunger. She had been walking for 3 days. The human colony sprawled before her. Squat buildings huddled together against the cold, smoke rising from chimneys into the gray sky. Somewhere in those buildings, she hoped, was someone who would give her a chance. Just one chance. That was all she needed. The first house she approached had cheerful yellow curtains in the windows. She knocked, her knuckles raw from the cold. A woman answered, took one look at Nessa's violet eyes and silver-streaked skin, and slammed the door so hard the frame rattled. The second house didn't even open. She heard movement inside, saw shadows pass behind frosted glass, but no one came dot at the third house. A man opened the door with a shotgun already raised. "Get off my property," he snarled. "We don't need your kind bringing trouble here." "Please," Nessa managed, her voice hoarse. "I just need work. I can clean, I can cook, I'm strong. Didn't you hear me? Get lost before I make you lost." The door slammed. Again, dot house after house, the pattern repeated. Sometimes they shouted. Sometimes they simply stared with cold eyes and closed the door quietly. Once, a child pointed at her and started crying, and the mother screamed at Nessa to stay away from her family dot by the time the sun began to set. Painting the snow in shades of pink and orange, Nessa had knocked on 27 doors. Her feet had gone numb hours ago. Her stomach cramped with a hunger so intense it felt like something was eating her from the inside. She couldn't remember the last time she'd had a full meal. 2 days ago, she'd found half a loaf of bread in a trash heap. Yesterday, nothing. The main street through the settlement was emptying as people hurried home to warm fires and hot food. Nessa stood in the center of the road, watching them pass, invisible despite her obvious difference. No one met her eyes. No one slowed their pace. She had nowhere to go. Behind the main cluster of houses, separated by a small field, stood a building with a different character than the rest. Larger, made of stone and timber, with wide doors and windows that glowed with forge light. Even from a distance, she could hear the ring of hammer on metal, smell the sharp tang of hot iron. A blacksmith's forge. Nessa's legs moved before her mind fully decided. She crossed the field, her feet leaving tracks in the fresh snow, and approached the building. Through the window, she could see a man working, his back to her, shoulders broad beneath a leather apron. Sparks flew from whatever he was hammering, creating brief constellations in the dim interior. She stood outside for a long time, gathering courage. This was her last attempt. If this door closed like all the others, she had nothing left. No strength to walk to another settlement. No hope of surviving the night in the cold dot. Her hand rose. Knocked dot the hammering stopped. Footsteps approached, heavy boots on a stone floor. The door swung open. The man was tall, with dark hair pulled back from a weathered face. His eyes were brown, almost black in the firelight, and they studied her with an intensity that made her want to look away. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30 winters, but his face carried lines that spoke of hardship beyond his years. His hands, gripping the doorframe, were scarred and calloused. "Please," Nessa said, before he could speak. "I need work. Any work. I can sweep, I can organize, I can learn. I'm desperate." He didn't answer immediately. His eyes traveled over her, not with the disgust she'd seen in others, but with something else. Assessment, perhaps. Or curiosity. "I don't have money to pay someone," he said finally. His voice was deep, rough from disuse. "I don't need money. Just food. A place to sleep. Anything. The words tumbled out faster now, desperation cracking through. I've been walking for days. No one will help me. Everyone here hates what I am. Something shifted in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or recognition. I can't, he started, and her heart plummeted. Wait, she interrupted, the words sharp with panic. She could feel herself breaking, feel the last threads of dignity unraveling. If you don't want a worker, I can ... I can offer something else. His brow furrowed. What do you mean? Heat flooded her face despite the cold. She forced herself to meet his eyes. My body? If that's what you want, I have nothing else to give. The silence that followed felt like falling through ice. His expression went through several changes. Surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like anger. But not at her. His jaw clenched, and when he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Is that what you think men want from you? It's what I have, she whispered. It's all anyone ever wants from someone like me. At least if I offer it first, I have some choice in the matter. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stepped back, pulling the door wider. Get inside. You're freezing. She didn't move. What do you want in return? Nothing. Get inside before you freeze to death on my doorstep. Still, she hesitated. Every instinct screamed that this was a trap, that his kindness would have a price, that she should run. But where would she run to? Into the snow, to die of cold and hunger? At least inside, she might survive the night. She stepped across the threshold. The forge was warm, almost painfully so after hours in the cold. The heat wrapped around her like a physical thing, making her skin prickle and her eyes water. The space was large, dominated by the forge itself, a massive stone structure with a fire that glowed like a captured sun. Tools hung on every wall, organized with careful precision. Half-finished pieces, horseshoes, hinges, decorative scrollwork lay on various workbenches. The man closed the door behind her and moved past, keeping a careful distance. He went to a chest in the corner and pulled out a blanket, rough wool that smelled of smoke. He held it out. Wrap this around yourself. She took it with trembling hands, pulling it tight around her shoulders. The warmth was almost unbearable, making her realize just how close she'd come to freezing. He studied her again, and she forced herself to stand still under his gaze. Let him look. Let him decide what he wanted. At least she was warm. When did you last eat? He asked. The question caught her off guard. 2 days ago. Maybe 3. I'm not sure anymore. He nodded once, then moved to a small room at the back of the forge. She heard him rummaging through something, the sound of ceramics clinking. When he returned, he carried a bowl of stew still steaming, rich with the smell of meat and vegetables, and a chunk of dark bread. He set them on a workbench. Eat. Nessa stared at the food, then at him, then back at the food. What do you want for this? For you to eat it before it gets cold. That's not how this works, she said, her voice cracking. Nothing is free, especially not for someone like me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up a stool and sat, putting himself at eye level with her. My name is Owen Blackwood. I'm a blacksmith, as you can see. I live alone because I prefer it that way. I'm not a good man, but I'm not the kind who takes advantage of desperate people. He paused. What's your name? Nessa, she whispered. Nessa, sit down and eat. We'll talk after. She wanted to argue, to demand he tell her his price, to maintain some illusion of control. But the smell of the stew was overwhelming, and her legs were shaking so badly, she wasn't sure how much longer she could stand. She sank onto a nearby bench and picked up the bowl with both hands. The first spoonful made her want to cry. It was simple fare, nothing fancy, but it was hot and rich and real. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity. Then hunger took over, and she devoured it, barely stopping to breathe, using the bread to soak up every last drop. Owen watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finished, she set the bowl down carefully and looked at him. "Thank you. Now tell me what you want. I want you to sleep." He pointed to a corner of the forge where a simple cot was tucked against the wall. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry. In the morning, if you still want work, we'll discuss it." "And if I don't want to work? If I want to pay you another way?" His face hardened. "Then you're free to leave. I don't trade kindness for anything, Nessa. Not work, not money, and certainly not what you offered at the door." She studied him, searching for the lie, for the crack in his facade. But all she saw was exhaustion that matched her own, and something else, a bone-deep loneliness that she recognized because she carried the same weight. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why help me when everyone else turned me away?" Owen stood and returned to his forge, picking up his hammer. The metal he'd been working on had cooled, and he thrust it back into the fire. "Because someone should have helped you a long time ago, and they didn't. Because you shouldn't have to offer yourself like a commodity just to survive." He met her eyes across the forge light. "Because I know what it's like to be alone." Nessa felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. She moved to the cot and lay down, still wrapped in the blanket. From this angle, she could watch Owen work, see the careful precision in every hammer blow, the way he turned the metal with practiced ease. Outside, the wind howled. But inside the forge, surrounded by warmth and the rhythmic sound of creation, Nessa closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she felt something other than fear. She felt the fragile, terrifying possibility of hope. The dawn light filtered through the forge windows, turning everything soft and golden. Nessa woke slowly, her body reluctant to leave the warmth of sleep. For a disorienting moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned. The cold, the rejection, the desperate offer, and Owen's unexpected kindness. She sat up carefully, looking around the forge. Owen was already awake, working at his anvil with the same focused intensity she'd observed last night. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years of practice, each hammer strike deliberate and precise. He hadn't noticed her stirring, lost in his work. Nessa stood, folding the blanket with careful hands. She wasn't sure what happened now. Would he ask her to leave? Would he demand payment after all? The uncertainty made her stomach clench. "There's water in the bucket by the door," Owen said, without looking up. "And bread in the cupboard if you're hungry." She found both where he'd indicated. The water was cold and clean, the bread fresh enough to still be soft. She ate slowly, watching him work, trying to understand this strange human who'd shown her mercy when no one else would. After a while, he set down his hammer and turned to face her. "You said you wanted work." "Yes." She straightened, trying to look capable despite her worn appearance. "Can you read?" "Yes. My people value education." He nodded, moving to a desk cluttered with papers. "I need someone to organize my orders. People leave notes, make requests, but I lose track. If you can sort these by date and item, it would help." He paused. "I can't pay much, but you'll have food, shelter, and a small wage. Enough to save if you want to move on eventually." Move on. The words settled strangely in her chest. She'd been trying to survive for so long, she hadn't thought about what came after survival. "I'll do it," she said quickly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The work is tedious." But there was something almost like warmth in his voice. They fell into a routine over the following days. Nessa organized a chaotic collection of orders, creating a system that made sense. She swept the forge, kept the workspace clean and learned to anticipate what tools Owen needed before he asked. In the evenings, they ate simple meals together, usually in silence. But it was a comfortable silence, not the oppressive kind she'd known before. Owen rarely spoke about himself, but Nessa learned him through observation. He rose before dawn and worked until his hands cramped. He was patient with his craft, but impatient with interruption. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow and another along his forearm. Sometimes, when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression would grow distant and sad. On the fourth day, the first visitor came. Nessa was organizing invoices when the forge door opened. A woman entered, tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair pulled into a severe bun. She wore a stained apron and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to being heard. Her eyes found Nessa immediately, and her expression curled. "Owen Blackwood," she said loudly. "What is that creature doing in your forge?" Owen looked up from his work, his expression cooling. "Margaret, what do you need?" "I need to know why you're harboring one of them." Margaret gestured at Nessa as if she were a stray animal. "The whole town is talking. Do you know what people are saying?" "I don't care what people say." "Well, you should. They're saying she's your companion." Margaret's lip curled on the last word. "That you're doing unnatural things with her." Nessa felt her face burn. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows, but there was nowhere to go. "They can say what they like." Owen's voice was dangerously quiet. "Nessa works for me. She earns her keep. That's all anyone needs to know. Working." Margaret's laugh was harsh. "Is that what we're calling it now? Owen, you're a respected craftsman. You can't throw away your reputation for that. Get out, Margaret." "I'm trying to help you." I said get out. Owen stood, his full height suddenly intimidating in the confined space. "Unless you have actual work for me, leave my forge." Margaret's face flushed red. She shot Nessa a look of pure venom before turning and stalking out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of a storm. "I'm sorry," Nessa whispered. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble." "You didn't cause anything. People like Margaret feed on gossip. If it wasn't you, she'd find something else to talk about." But his jaw was tight, and his hands clenched at his sides. The visits continued. Over the next week, a steady stream of townspeople found reasons to stop by the forge. Some came with legitimate work, a broken hinge, a dulled blade, but their eyes always found Nessa, always judged. Others came simply to stare, to whisper among themselves, to make their disapproval known. A man named Thomas Greer, who Nessa learned was on the town council, stopped by one evening. He was thin and sharp-featured, with pale eyes that reminded Nessa of ice. "Blackwood," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "The council has concerns about your ... employee. My business is my own, Greer. Not when it affects the whole community. We don't know anything about her kind. She could be dangerous. She could be carrying diseases. She's been here a week. If she were dangerous or diseased, you'd know by now." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You're being foolish, soft-hearted. There are standards in this community, and harboring aliens isn't acceptable. Then change the laws. Until then, she stays. You're making a mistake." Thomas moved closer, his voice dropping. "People are talking about more than just your reputation. They're talking about forcing the issue, for the good of the settlement." Something dangerous flashed in Owen's eyes. "Let them try." After Thomas left, Owen stood at the forge for a long time, staring into the flames. Nessa approached carefully. "You should send me away," she said quietly. "Before this gets worse." "No." "Owen, they're threatening you. Your business, your standing in the community. All because of me." He turned to face her, and she was startled by the intensity in his expression. "Do you want to leave?" Double quotes. She stopped. Did she? The forge had become the first safe place she'd known in years. Owen had given her not just shelter, but dignity, treating her like a person, not a thing to be used or feared. "No, but I don't want to ruin your life." "My life was already ruined," he said flatly, "long before you knocked on my door. At least now it has some purpose." Before she could ask what he meant, a rock shattered one of the forge windows. Glass exploded inward, and Nessa screamed, throwing her arms over her head. Owen moved instantly, positioning himself between her and the window. Outside, she could hear laughter and jeering voices. "Get rid of the alien. She doesn't belong here. Send her back where she came from." Owen grabbed a hammer and strode to the door, but by the time he yanked it open, the attackers had scattered into the darkness. Only broken glass and cruel words remained. He closed the door and locked it, something Nessa realized he'd never done before. When he turned back, she saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not for himself, but for her. "You should sleep in the back room tonight," he said. "Away from the windows. Owen, please, Nessa." She nodded, gathering her blanket. As she moved to the back room, a small storage space, Owen cleared of tools, she felt the weight of everything pressing down. The hatred, the fear, the impossible situation they'd fallen into. She lay in the darkness, listening to Owen move around the forge, boarding up the broken window, checking the locks. And she wondered how long they could hold out against an entire town's hatred. In the morning, Nessa found Owen asleep at his workbench, hammer still in hand, dark circles under his eyes. She approached quietly, studying his face. He looked younger in sleep, the hard lines softened. She found herself wondering about his past, about what he'd meant when he said his life was already ruined. Carefully, she took the hammer from his grip and set it aside. He stirred but didn't wake. Over the next days, the hostility escalated. Someone painted crude words on the forge's outer wall. Customers who'd been coming to Owen for years suddenly took their business elsewhere. Children threw stones at the building and ran away laughing. Through it all, Owen remained stubborn. He worked his forge, paid Nessa her wages, and refused to discuss sending her away. But Nessa could see the toll it was taking. He grew quieter, more withdrawn. Sometimes she caught him staring at nothing, his expression haunted. One evening, as they ate their simple dinner in silence, Nessa finally spoke. "Tell me about yourself." "About before." Owen looked up, surprised. "Why?" "Because you know everything about me, why I'm desperate, why I'm alone. But I know nothing about you." He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. "I had a wife once, Catherine. We married young, built a life here." "She was." He paused, struggling with the words. "She was everything good. Kind, patient, always seeing the best in people. What happened? 3 years ago, there was an outbreak. A disease that spread through the settlement. Catherine worked at the infirmary, helping care for the sick. She caught it. His hands tightened around his cup. I begged her to stop, to stay away, but she said people needed help, that she couldn't abandon them." Nessa felt her throat tighten. "She died 2 weeks later. After that, I couldn't look at this town the same way. All these people she'd helped, and none of them came to her funeral. They were too afraid of contagion." His voice was hollow. "So I stopped caring what they thought. Stopped caring about much of anything. Until now," Nessa said softly. He met her eyes. "Until now." The air between them felt charged, heavy with unspoken things. Nessa wanted to reach across the table, to offer comfort, but she wasn't sure she had the right. "She would have helped me," Nessa said. Wouldn't she? You're Catherine. Owen smiled, sad and genuine. Yes, she would have opened the door before you even knocked. Then you're honoring her. By helping me. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just tired of being alone. The honesty in his words struck something deep in Nessa's chest. She realized, with sudden clarity, that she wasn't just grateful to Owen anymore. Somewhere in the quiet evenings and shared silences, something else had grown. Something that felt dangerously like connection. I'm glad you opened the door, she said. So am I. That night, as Nessa lay in the back room, she heard Owen working late into the night. The rhythmic hammer strikes felt like a heartbeat, steady and sure. And for the first time since arriving at the settlement, she allowed herself to imagine a future that extended beyond mere survival. But outside, in the darkness, the town's hatred was gathering like a storm. And storms, Nessa knew, always broke eventually. The break came sooner than expected.